Welcome to Find Your Tribe podcast. We're broadcasting from beautiful Portland, Oregon. My name is Annie Lavender Weller. I'm a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians and co-founder of the Leadership Lab, which is a career, academic, and transitional coaching nonprofit. I'm also a serial entrepreneur, author, and International Coaching Federation ACC certified business coach and consultant. Welcome to my podcast, Find Your Tribe. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Find Your Tribe. This is Annie, your host, and today I have Michael Kennedy. He is a technologist, podcaster, and entrepreneur. He is also host and founder of the two most popular Python podcasts, Talk Python to Me and Python Bytes. He teaches online courses for developers through his business, Talk Python Training. Michael also loves to help fellow podcasters and developers make their way around the world. Welcome, Michael, to Find Your Tribe.
Hi, Annie. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to finally be on your show.
I know. We've had a couple interesting, I don't want to say issues, but things that have happened in the past couple of weeks. So I'm really
curious.
things
that we're trying to get in the way, but we made it work.
Yes, we did make it work. So one of the things that I like to start out asking my the people coming on the show is, what does Find Your Tribe mean to you?
Well, I think, we all know that there are people that have our interests out there, right? And I think in high school, that means the group of people we hang out with, we know, like, these are my people, right? And as we get older, I think in some sense, these friend relationships kind of fade. Like, I'm still friends with people from high school, but they're scattered throughout the world. I don't spend that much time with them and so on. And so I think Find Your Tribe starts to make its way into your personal interests, into your work, and so on. And it's really such an amazing time because this is traditionally meant networking in your area, or maybe going to a conference once a year or something. And now, as you well know, this is the time to connect with people around the world at a scale that is just literally, I think, not really possible for humans to comprehend, right? Like, you can find people who are interested and super passionate about the things that you're doing on the internet in so many ways, whether it's through having a podcast, being part of forums, Slack channels. There's just, so many ways. But to me, it means taking what I'm passionate about and connecting with other people who are equally passionate about, right? The same thing, right? So people who would say, if I didn't have a job, if I retired, I would just do more of this and like have less meetings, right? Whatever that is, right? That's your tribe, and you go find those people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do you do? Because I don't think a lot of people out there know what Python is. Can you explain what Python is?
Sure. So we won't make this a technical podcast for sure.
Why not? I'm kind of a geeky girl.
Yeah, so. Sure. I know. That's awesome. So Python is one of the more popular programming languages. It's a general purpose programming language. So many well-known websites that everyone listening definitely knows about probably uses Python to write these websites. For example, YouTube is written in Python. Instagram, the website, not the apps, is written in Python. And Python is really used in three major ways. I would say it's used sort of to manage software inside of companies and lots of servers and stuff. It's really focused on building web applications. So a lot of, like I said, websites I named. And it's also used in artificial intelligence. It's the most popular language for this whole new AI world that we're entering into. So self-driving cars, speech recognition, all the crazy stuff that you wouldn't think of. And it goes really far. So, for example, one of the things that's recently notable is a bunch of mammogram images from women who either maybe had breast cancer or didn't. And they recently used Python to analyze those images and predict whether or not those images were images of cancer at a higher rate than trained radiologists. So
interesting.
There's all sorts of stuff that's being done with it. It's amazing. Yeah.
So why is Python so used compared to the other programs or programming?
Well, it's a really, really simple language. So it's a lot of programming languages that have lots of curly braces and parentheses and funky symbols. And I guess I don't really know why they're written that way, because they don't need to be. But Python is a language that's written really simply. And it's pretty welcoming to the beginner. It's the most taught first course for computer science students at universities, for example. So it's really good for learning, but many of these languages that are good for learning are not good for real work, right? So like maybe what you would use to teach kids programming, they would never have a job doing that. They would never build Instagram or YouTube or something. Whereas Python, it has the ability to become more complicated, but only when you need it. And so it's like something that you can simply learn and enjoy, but you are not pigeonholed into, building really simple things.
Yeah. So I remember going to summer camp, and there was, I believe I want to say it was between 6th and 7th grade. I'm in my 40s. So that's when computers were coming out, and, things were, you know about MS-DOS, and you were able to manipulate things more. But memory, of course, was always an issue and a problem. But I remember taking a programming class. I believe it was a C++, and you say the hello world pops up. So how did you get started in your path into Python or into just computers
how
general?
Did I get into programming? Yeah. So, well, I always kind of liked computers. I thought technology was cool. I remember when the internet, before there was the World Wide Web, and that was such an interesting and weird and wild open time. But I didn't really get into programming until I guess I got into college, and life follows all these funny paths, right? Like I didn't go to school to become a programmer. I didn't think I would become a programmer. I just took a couple of programming classes because I needed some requirements and I figured programming would help, right? Well, it turns out some project I was working on my math degree actually, for my math work required me to learn programming so I could work with these supercomputers to do my math work. And I started and I really started to enjoy that. And it was so much fun to work on these big problems and stuff. But it occurred to me after a while, I'd be working on the problem and having a great time and just enjoying what I was up to. And it was like a summer project. And then I would go, well, this part's not fun anymore. And I realized that every time that would happen, I'd be like working on a math part of the problem, not the programming part. I'm like, why am I studying math again? What's going on here? So eventually I just sort of became a self-taught programmer and stopped studying math. Right? I still love it, but it's not nearly as practical as programming.
Yeah, I might have to call you because my husband just went back to school and he's getting his post-bac and his master's in environmental engineering.
Oh, okay.
And yes, and he's taking statistics and all these he's like, do you remember, oh my gosh, I can't remember what it was. It was some math problem. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't heard that since 8th grade. It was it's really crazy. So I might be calling you later about some math issues.
Yeah, I had to learn for my daughters who are seniors now, and they're going through their math classes and they're asking for help. I'm like, wow, I haven't thought about that for a really long time, but I guess I can dig it back out.
Exactly. So after college, did you get a job in programming? Is that how?
Yeah, pretty much. I worked at a crazy company, a crazy cool company. So as a way to pay for school, I started taking jobs during winter break and over summer and stuff. And I started working in California for this company called eye tracking, EYE tracking, not like phones. And it was all this technology built around analyzing what people were looking at. So it would, with these cameras that would look at your eyes and then they could figure out where you're looking in real time. And then you would do various things. Like you could study advertisements and see what people look at, or you could analyze websites and say, what's the usability of this website? Hey, Joe, your laptop's broken, try to return it. And if they all look to the left for the return option, it's always in the right, you can tell where they think, even if you don't ask them, you just ask them to do the thing and then you see where they looked. So I actually worked there for a long time building all kinds of funky things around what people are looking at. It was really fun.
So did you just do programming, or did you also help in the devices? I'm guessing somebody would have to wear a device or something.
Yeah, we pretty much got the device from other companies.
Other companies?
Yeah. But they were really wild, these things. We worked on research projects, secret military projects from DARPA and all kinds of stuff. Cool. It was wild, yeah.
I was always wondering what happened to, was it the Google glasses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought those were really cool.
Yeah, those were super cool, but you don't hear about them anymore, do you?
I think the price point was probably an issue.
Yeah.
That's what I'm guessing. I don't know.
Yeah. And then also you had that whole, the whole sort of social pushback around calling people glass holes.
Oh,
Right? You know
I
this for
didn't
people who would wear them to like social events, but then be
even.
recording everybody that they're like interacting with. If you're like, I don't want to be recorded. I just trying to relax, turn that thing off, right? But
So I'm going to ask this question. So what's the difference between that and Snapchat, Instagram memories, Facebook memories? Because if you think
yeah,
about it, when we're doing selfies or when we're out and about recording, like we went to zoo lights, we
yeah,
were snapping, we were, doing Instagram memories, we were on Facebook, and there's hundreds of people probably that didn't. So
yeah.
yeah,
I think
interesting.
part of it is 4 or 5 years. People have
Hmm.
just become more accustomed to like, fine, we're just going to be constantly videoed. All right.
Constantly. Yes.
But the other
Yes.
part is also, I think, the Google Glass was always on potentially. And so if someone's going to take a selfie or something, at least, you see them holding a camera. It's like as if they have like a hidden camera, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So after that job, did you take another job or did you go straight into entrepreneurship? Because I'm always very fascinated about how people become entrepreneurs. I just came out, I'm air quoting right now, as an entrepreneur. It took me 40 years, but in fact, I started my career, my first company when I was 23, 24, and I was in grad school.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
I was getting a degree in communications, and how I got into communications was I had to take a PR class, and for a credit or something like that. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this anyways, because I had a lot of friends that were comics and actors, and I was doing some improv. And anyways, that's how I started my business. So I'm just always really curious how people become entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a really fun experience. So I'd say for the last 10 or 15 years, I've always wanted to create my own thing. I have tons of ideas, and I'm always like, well, I wish I could pursue this thing or that thing. And the more that I worked at a company, one, you kind of learn, okay, this is how the business world works. This is how marketing works. This is how customer calls, if you're going to have a meeting with some big client, go, right? And so you
Mm-hmm.
get more and more confidence that way. But I just decided, I had been working for a large company at the time, and I just, one, my podcast was really taking off, and just out of, I guess some effort, but also some luck, it was growing into something that I could probably base the founding
Mm-hmm.
of a business on. But I also just used the 5-year test, right? I felt
Okay.
like I was waking up every day and I would work hard on something, and I would give it like a 50-50 chance that that project would be canceled or used or not.
Mm-hmm.
And even within that, it's like, well, I need you to go work on this. My manager would say to the effect of, I need you to go work on this thing. And, is it going to make any difference? Am I just wasting my energy? So I really felt like I wanted to wake up every day and contribute my energy and what I can contribute to the world in the best way possible. And I just felt
Mm-hmm.
like I was really not doing that at a big company. And the other thing, like the 5-year test, I looked down the hall at the people who were sort of above me, what they were doing, thinking, do I want to do that in 5 years? And the answer was definitely not. So I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, well, how do I quit my job? How do I go do something else? Right. Like I just said, my daughters are seniors, they're twins. They're going to be going to college in 6 months or something.
Oh my goodness.
I know that's a lot of financial
Mm-hmm.
extras to be throwing on, right?
Mm-hmm.
All at once. And so I had to be a little careful. I couldn't just try it and, see how it worked. But I ultimately decided, like, at least, as a software developer, it's a little bit different maybe, but I thought, what's the worst case scenario? I go try to start this company, and then what if it fails? Well, probably the worst case scenario is I have to go get a job just like the one I have now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well, if failure looks like what I'm doing now, let's try success.
So what is your Talk Python to me? Is that your
I've
first
actually tried,
business?
yeah, I
Or
tried a couple of other businesses, and I learned really painfully that technology is basically table stakes for businesses, but it is
Mm-hmm.
not the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can come up with some really amazing businesses, but if you
Mm-hmm.
can't get people to pay attention to them, to learn about them, to share it, to buy it, it doesn't matter how awesome the technology is. So really, I've learned that marketing and outreach is more important than even technology. And that
Yes.
was a little hard to learn, but it was definitely, in the early days of my technology career, because like, oh, I can build this amazing thing, and if it's amazing, people will come.
Yep.
I wish I wish the world worked that way. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I had my marketing advertising firm, the first thing that people did, I had to go through the whole 2008 just hellfire falling from the sky, our big recession that we had. And the first thing that people took out of their budget was marketing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how are people going to buy your product or know about your product?
Don't you need to double down on that?
Exactly. You should be double downing on that, or at least doing it in an intelligent way that makes sense for your ideal client or who that ideal client base is, if it's multiple ideal clients.
Yeah. So part of the secret sauce of what I'm doing now is I started with the audience rather than starting with a product. And I knew that I wanted to create the product, but I'm like, well, why don't I go do something else that I'm interested in, like create this podcast that is all around the thing that I want to do, and focus on that for a while. And then if that goes well, then I can change my focus over to more of the business side. So that actually turned out to be, I don't know how much conscious good choice it was, but it definitely turned out to be the right way to do it, because if you have a group of people that already know about you and are interested in what you're doing, and you have something related, that's so much easier than, coming out of the woodwork and saying, I've created this amazing thing, you should have it. People, yeah, I just saw 500 amazing things, I'm not interested.
So is your 2 podcasts and then your online training, those are only things that you currently do, or are you always thinking of other stuff that you want to do? Because I'm crazy like that.
Yes, I am too. When I quit my job, the podcast was one of the things, in the courses was one of the options, but I actually wrote down a list of, these are the things I seriously am considering going to do now that I'm going to go do something else. There were 30 something items on that list, other stuff. And it, I ended up going with the podcasts and courses, but it could have easily been something else. There's a ton of businesses I want to start. But what I think is really interesting is how much of that is just, people say, well, I have this amazing idea. I'm like, okay, that's a pretty cool idea, but that's, people think they have these $1 million ideas, and I don't think there are $1 million ideas. I think there are $1 million companies, but an idea is just like an idea. Like, you've got to, spend 6 months or a year working and betting your time and energy on that idea for it to become worth something.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you give a tip to? I've noticed a lot of people in the technology spectrum, especially I worked with a lot of software and developers because we did websites and other things, developed other things. I noticed when they were freelancing, they were doing okay. But even as a freelancer, you're owning your own business. You're being an entrepreneur and you have to market yourself. I know you said marketing was one of your biggest challenges. What do you feel like is one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people out there that are entrepreneurs are, that roadblock, I guess?
I guess there's a couple of things. I still would put the marketing, getting the word out, awareness as absolutely the highest thing. Even for me today, it's still my hardest challenge, ironically. But it's definitely a big deal. But I also think, maybe persistence. It's both a challenge and a possible superpower. So what I mean is, these things take time, right? The growth of businesses and these freelance projects, they're not linear. It's not like, well, I did this for 6 months and now it's doing $1,000 a month of business. If I do it for another 6 months, it'll be 2,000. So how many years it's going to take me to get a decent salary, right? Like it doesn't go that way. It goes 1 for 15. You know what I mean? Right? So this ability to persist on a single idea and just stay focused long enough, I think it's really a challenge, but it's also, if you can do it, it puts you where you need to be, where most people quit before then.
Yeah. And, it's just interesting that we're talking about entrepreneurship, and, you're a programmer, and a lot of people don't, see that correlation, where there's a lot of people out there that are amazing entrepreneurs, and they know how to do it. We have like the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs and the people on that line. But one of the things I've seen, because I work in a co-working space, that I see a lot of developers or programmers or people that are building technology, where they fail is they just don't have a plan of how they're going to work together as a team. Because if you're working on a project and developing something, it just can't be yourself, and you have to start building that team. Do you feel like that's something that you've seen happen too, or am I just going crazy?
No, I do. I think the root of what you're saying is it takes more, and it's related to what I was saying. It takes more than just technical skills, and also more than just marketing skills, more than just business skills. And it's really rare that one individual possesses all those things plus the energy and focus to do them all at the same time, right? And so you need people to help you along the way, and compensate or enhance where you don't have a skill.
Yeah,
right?
especially complimenting.
Yeah, exactly. I think that that's the most significant part of it. But yeah, it's really important, I think.
If you could give like one word of advice to somebody that's out there that's looking to start their own, I feel that there's different, let me back up a little bit, because I think that there's different, I don't want to say issues or problems, but roadblocks for different types of industry. And I feel that people think like the technology industry is just booming, and you go down to Silicon Valley and you sit in a garage and you walk out a millionaire or billionaire, and it's not that easy.
It's definitely not that easy, no.
Yeah, and so the Bill Gates of the world and all these people, I always use Bill Gates, they had to really work their ass off to get where they are, and it just didn't come really that easy. If you could give like somebody a word of advice, what would it be?
Well, I think it's probably two parts. One is try many, many ideas. You don't have to, I don't know, the chance to experiment right now is really quite powerful. Right? So one of the books I really liked reading was, I'll recommend two, and I can't remember which it was. I think it's the $100 Startup. Or it was either that or the 7-Day Startup. I read them at the same time, and one was okay.
I'll put them in the show notes.
But the idea was, look, you can create these things enough of a thing to see if it's interesting to people, right? With the ability to just like pop up a web page and a domain name and go to 99 Designs and hire a graphic artist to build you something really quick. You could come up with something that you could then, let's say, go and meet people in your target demographic in person and say, this is what I'm building. We're not ready yet, but I'm building this. What do you think about this? Could I sign you up to get started early? Is this something you would buy? Things like that. And you don't have to get super, super brave, save up 2 months of salary and quit your job and then start that process, usually, right? Because then the clock is ticking and the pressure is extreme for you to solve that problem in 2 months, or your dreams are crushed, right? Don't do that. You can do these things on the side. You can come up with ideas. You can reach out to people. And if one of them gets traction, then you can put that energy into it, right? So I think that that's one part. The other is, if you can bring your audience or build your audience first, you have dramatically elevated your chances of being successful. Because like we said, marketing is crazy hard. So if you, through public speaking, through podcasts, interviews, running a podcast, writing a blog, whatever, if you can become super well known for a thing, that can be your channel to be the initial seed.
Yeah. One of the tips that I give people in regards to marketing is, for instance, your own personal Facebook page. They're like, well, I don't want to shove my business stuff down people's throats. I'm like, you have 500, 1,000, 2,000 followers that are already connected to you in some way, that already champions for you.
Yeah.
So you should mix in your personal with the business, because people really want to hear what you're doing with business. And maybe, one of those people could be a huge champion for you, and you get that $1 million sale. Somebody knows somebody somehow.
Exactly. Yeah, you probably want to post every day about your business to your personal feed, but certainly reach out to your network and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. If anybody, let's say you're writing software for landscape people, right? Like, if anyone knows someone who owns a landscape company, or they have a landscape company, could you just, make an introduction for me? So that seems to me like a really good way to use your trusted friends, but not to abuse them.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, friends do that. I have friends that are mortgage brokers and real estate agents. So it's like, they're doing the exact same thing. Why can't you?
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to talk more about your podcast, but one of the things that, I geek out about is, things that are coming up, the self-driving cars, the AI. So what is really hot right now that it's something that's going to just blow our freaking socks off in 2018?
What is going to blow our socks off?
I'm like, ha ha ha.
I think one of the really interesting trends that we have to come to terms with, I think self-driving cars are definitely one of them. This whole idea of image recognition and artificial intelligence is really, really funny. There was just a discovery of 2 new planets around some nearby star. It was made by NASA in collaboration with Google.
That's cool.
Yeah. And cool. It was because Google brought their artificial intelligence stuff to find, their AI found those planets. I gave you the example of breast cancer detection with machine learning and stuff like that. But there's some really funny consequences that are coming out of this that we're going to have to, as a society, come to terms with. Like, we were talking about Snapchat and pictures, and just basically coming to terms with the fact that you're constantly videoed by random people, and that's somewhat okay now.
Yes.
But traditionally, we've been able to know why computer programs do a thing. They might be really complicated, but if, let's say a self-driving car, for an example. If a self-driving car is driving along and then it turns and it crashes into a tree because there was a ball in the road, right? You traditionally would be able to go look at that program and say, well, there's an if statement that says, if you think it's a kid in the street, you swerve no matter what, right? And maybe the ball was a kid. This new world that we're entering doesn't work like that. There's a company called NVIDIA that created a self-driving car, and it was pretty successful. And the way they made it drive was not by saying, if the road goes a little right, turn a little right. They didn't do that. What they did was they just showed it the interactions a human had while driving a lot, and it learned.
Oh.
Right.
Oh,
it learned. I push on the gas, it goes forward. I hit the brake, it does this. I steer. I see a car in front of my way, I stop. Right. It literally learned by observing through what's called deep learning. And
not a lot of people know about deep learning. Can you explain a little bit about what deep learning is? Because it's been around for a while.
Yeah. So I'm not an expert at all, but I'll do my best. So this idea is you set up these mathematical models that somewhat represent the way neurons work through what's called neural networks. And you create sort of chains of these things, and then you set up a feedback loop. So you send it inputs like picture looks like this, or here's a car, here's a person, we're going this speed, right? And then it will make some kind of response to that, and you tell it that was a good response or a bad response. And there's a way to sort of fold the good responses back in. So a simpler version would be, I'm playing chess. I made a move and I took out a character. I took out the rook or something. So you give it a positive feedback. But if it were taken out itself as a result of that, then you would give it a negative feedback for that, potentially. So it kind of builds up this. It's a little bit like you teach a kid, right? You just tell them words over and over and over until it just sort of sticks. It's crazy.
But deep learning is super quick though. It's not just it doesn't take, a child. It doesn't take 3 years to learn how to
No.
speak. It takes
Maybe it
3 months or 3 days.
Yeah, maybe it takes the equivalent of impressions, but you can, with a computer, you can make it get the impressions a lot, right? Like Google, I think it was Google. Someone just taught, I think it was Google's AI to play chess without anyone telling it what the rules of chess were or anything. Just that was good, that was bad. You win, you lose. Right? You did this, you lost. You did that, you win. And that feedback loop, it learned that to a very, very high level in 4 hours with nobody even telling it what chess was.
Yeah.
So it's insane. And the interesting knock-on effect of this is people don't know why these systems do what they do. So for example, that self-driving car, if it was that NVIDIA version that had been taught by observation and it swerved and crashed into the tree, nobody knows why. The machine that said, this is cancer and this is not cancer for 2 women, nobody knows why it thought it was cancer or not. And they can't follow it. They can't debug it. They can't prove it. They just know it's pretty often right. And it says this. So, so we're going to be in a world where there's no way to know why these computers, which are increasingly taking over our lives in terms of driving and helping us and analyzing us, we don't know why they do it. And so that's going to be a bizarre place to be.
Yeah. I just, it's kind of weird. I think of like movies like The Matrix or something along that line. It's like that. I'm not saying The Matrix was going to happen, but I just, it's odd to me because I don't see something, I think where my brain like has a disconnect in regards to deep thinking and this AI and so forth. It's like a child. The child grows and gets taller and becomes an adult, where this computer, it's growing, but it's growing somehow inside this like, this Tron. I'm using movie analogies because it's the only way I can explain it. It's like these like circuit boards that are growing more intelligently, but they're not physically growing in any capacity. So you could have something like a size of a smartphone that can be the most powerful, intelligent being. I don't know. Can you call a computer a being?
It's interesting. One of the things that seems to be really lacking from all of these systems, which is probably good, is self-awareness and willpower. Like you can ask a kid, all right, kid, you crashed the car. Why did you crash the car? Well, there was a ball and I thought it was a kid, right? The computer, like it won't tell you really why, right? It just knows, well, I needed to do that. And also I don't see any of these examples where the thing wants to learn to play chess or it really wants to drive the car. It's just people made it drive the car. And so it just listened and it just did. So I'm not really worried that in the sense of like Terminator, let's keep movies going. Like, something's going to come and take over the world and enslave humans in that way. I'm just not at all worried about that. But I am worried about
zombies.
I'm
just joking.
Yes. In Portland, we have a serious zombie problem. No. So what I am worried about, though, is the social consequences and inequality and stuff that would come along. So in the United States, if you go look at the census, the number one job of men is driving. Right?
That's interesting.
Deliver big trucks, delivery vehicles, taxi, you name it. Well, if self-driving cars come along and they effectively, drop that employment rate by 90%, what effect will that have on society? We already have an unequal society, but now these owners of machines make, so much more revenue. And if we have a large population of people who are unemployed and the opportunities in some sense may be shrinking because machines, like it's not just taxi drivers, right? It's potential oncologists and stuff like that. I mean, it's high in jobs. You think, oh, I went to school for 25 years to become a doctor and study cancer. Like, yeah, well, that camera over there is better than you. Right. And so.
And we've already seen this happen, though, in industries over the past, 100 years, 150 years. I mean, where people were,
farming.
Like you think about just like Detroit and how Detroit was building all of our cars and so forth. And they blame it, on political things or China's building. And it's like, no, robots have taken over your job because it's faster and it's economically more feasible because they don't have to pay, for healthcare, for salaries, for, what if you can't, go and do your job on the line? There's you have to get somebody to replace it's just crazy that people aren't recognizing it more and blaming other things. And I think it has a lot to do with politics, and we're not going to go down that road. But
I do think there's a coming wave of a backlash against technology. There's a pretty interesting article in Wired, and I can't remember exactly what the name. It was something like, it says Silicon Valley techies still think they're the good guys. They're not. And that's the headline. That's the front page of Wired. I mean, that is intense. I would say one of the big differences when you think about the analogies of this, like artificial intelligence effects on society and automation and technology in general, versus, people compare it to, say, the Industrial Revolution, right? Where now we only have 2% of the people who work on farms in the US, but it's fine. It's fine because that happened over 50 or 100 years, right? But the rate of technology goes, it could be, 10 years from now, a quarter of the population no longer has a job because whatever.
It could be even sooner than that, honestly. I mean, just thinking about the way technology has been advancing as quickly as it has, it's interesting. My grandmother's in her 80s, and I was talking to her, and I'm like, you have seen a lot of stuff. And she's like, yes, I have. And I think the number one thing that I think has bothered her the most is just how our society, because of the lack of jobs, the lack of, especially for, the middle to lower, class individuals that, cook our meals and wait. I mean, all that stuff is, we can have like data from Star Trek, like taking these positions too, just thinking about how things are just becoming so automated, and we do drive-throughs, and even our coffee and everything comes in these little pods. And I'm just waiting one day to get one of those like machines. I press a button and it just makes me whatever I want.
Right. Like on Star Trek.
On Star Trek. It's like, I want a banana, push banana. There's a banana.
It's not necessarily impossible, right? That's pretty amazing. So I'm actually really positive on the future and how things are with technology, but I do think that it's not all, sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. There's definitely going to be a give and take, and there's going to be some stuff that we as a society don't see coming. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I'm excited, honestly. But the thing is it doesn't freak me out that we're going to have Terminators. I'm just freaked out that we're not going to be able to control